Hello and welcome to Muse and Metrics. This is your host, Philippa Burgess. This is season 5, episode 6, and today's topic is engineering success.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sherry Yang. I'm a Women Techmaker ambassador with Google, and I've been part of this program since 2016. My professional title is the engineering team lead at Adaptivist. I have over decades of experience in the tech industry, working from apply research to startup to currently working in automation in work processing. In terms of what I give to the tech industry is really my specialty in engineering management, talent recruitment, project engagement, and digital advocacy. When I'm not working in tech, I like to connect with the nature. I love hiking the Rockies, as well as being able to having quiet time to bundle up and sit down and finish thousands of pieces of puzzles with a nice cup of coffee.
Those are all great things, and so we'll have lots to talk about. This is great.
Oh yeah.
Let me start with the fact that the thing that among all those things, several things caught my attention, but I want to start with the 7 years as a Google Women Techmakers ambassador. So the program, I would imagine, has evolved over 7 years.
And
What are you seeing? Tell us that story about where you got in, where and how long the program perhaps existed before that. I don't really know much of the history of the program, and just what you've seen over the last 7 years.
Yeah, the program Women Techmakers program evolved over the years, just like how I am as a person in my tech career evolved. In the beginning, I got into Women Techmaker as a member because I want to participate in Google I/O in person. And Google I/O, we're all very familiar with, is pretty pricey. So as a member of a Woman Techmaker, you will be getting and invited as at a discounted rate. So that was like really like my in to try to get to Google I/O in person in California in Mountain View. And I didn't know that this will now become like such a huge community that I heavily participate with. But over the years, I changed my focus in striving to empower women in tech and only get involved in Women in Tech initiative. And later, as I grow in my career and getting involved with other technologies and different companies, different groups, different leadership, I realize it's the intersectionality in tech that I want to focus in. We should share resources. We should share our environment together. So as a Women Techmaker ambassador, I started to focus on getting involved with existing tech communities and empower the existing tech community with the focus of DE&I, understand what it is to encourage more underrepresented group to participate, create events that is inclusive to all those who don't look like us, and try to get them to participate. I believe, showing up is the number one thing to show representation as well as becoming someone else's role model. So that has been later on and most currently like my drive to be an active Woman Techmaker ambassador.
That's wonderful. Like again, the program's evolved. You've evolved in it, and let's talk about your journey to becoming your full stack developer today. How did you get here? Because as I understand it, it was not, as you perceive it, a traditional path.
Yeah, I, as someone with a Taiwanese background, and an immigrant to Canada, my parents just like any immigrant parents would, their first ideas of some success is to become a doctor or become a lawyer of that sort, and that will, you know, expedite your success trajectory in the North American space. And I got that, and I understand that, you know, that was something that I wanted to do. So my goal coming out of high school is to actually become a surgeon. I was really involved in a lot of biologies. I love chemistry as well. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll become a surgeon. I'll get into sciences, and I'll just, like, you know, figure it out. But obviously that didn't played out. And I got a chance to touch code in university, and decided that I want to pivot my entire education journey to tech, because I really enjoy being able to interact with the computer and seeing results happening with, like, this process. So instead of continue my journey on with university, I dropped out of university and decided to go into a technical institute and finish my 2-year diploma with a technical institute in software development. And from there, the rest is history.
You clearly had a growth mindset, and tech evolves and we evolve. And looking at your GitHub, you say, hey, and here's all the things I'm learning. And then, of course, you've got most of them already crossed out saying, I've accomplished this, and now I'm moving on to this next piece. I also had immigrant parents, but I think just being British, I didn't get the you need to be a doctor or an engineer. My dad's an engineer. So when I said, I want to go to Hollywood, they said, sure, go for it. So I went to USC, and now some 30 years later, I'm still at USC. But this time I am pursuing a master's of science. And so it took me this long to come to owning my identity as a woman in tech and a woman in STEM, but I'm getting there. And I really appreciate the foundations that my parents gave me in math, because I feel like a lot of people I meet who don't have an Asian or South Asian background are very math afraid. And I feel that that is just something that we culturally amplify, because our media is a reflection of our society, and our society then reflects our media. And if you're good at math, you're an outcast. You're the nerd. You're not, it's not the way to become popular. Apparently, I'm spending a lot of time with my mom now. I blurted out, apparently, sometime in my childhood to my mom, and she's now reminded me that she was making a salad and having some friends over. And I told her, Mom, salad is not how you make friends. I don't know. And so sometimes, like, that's how some of our North American, and I speak to as an American culture, is not very supportive of people learning maths and sciences. And now the US government has an initiative called You Belong in STEM, and about how do we make the sciences both attractive and inclusive, because it's two sides to that. One, when people are in maths and sciences, as someone who had gone on a creative path, I never felt included or saying, oh, come here and learn this. It was saying, oh, well, you're not one of us and you will never be. So go away. And that arts and sciences are so split. And yet coming in with an art background and learning science, I'm seeing so much crossover. I see so much creativity is needed in tech. So much problem solving skills is needed in tech. So much vision is needed in tech. So much collaboration, so much iteration, which are all the things you need in arts and communications.
I think the academic itself is also a little contradicting, and it sort of speak on behalf of your, like, arts and science are splitting, because if you're someone who's getting a computer science degree, it's actually not faculty of science. It's not under a science degree. It's actually under an arts degree. And then if you're someone who's completed a software engineering degree, that's an engineering degree, which is kind of weird. I don't know the the divide there, and I don't quite understand that. The difference between how academics decided to split that, arts and science. But I would like to say, and some people uses the new phrase of STEAM to include arts as well. And I think it's important that to know that we're all creative. It's really important to know that we're all creative here because we're creating a solution. We're using our creative mind to come up with solutions, whether it is a piece of art or is it a piece of software solution. In my mind, we're all creative.
I agree with that. And we're all communicators. I noticed that the reason that I did as well as I did, even though I'll just put it in academic grade terms, I did my master's in urban planning, which is Master's of Arts, straight A's. My lowest grade was actually in my economics class, was an A-. And that was really sort of my first time retouching math. And once I kind of got it, I was like, oh yes, okay, this is interesting. And it just took me a little longer to get up to speed with it. Whereas everything else was research, writing, papers, presentations, super easy for me to deliver. And then when I started my GIST, which is Geographic Information Science and Technology, I was completely overwhelmed with just the concepts of science, how you presented the science scope of focus and the methodology, the results, the discussion. And once I kind of got the template of what it was and what they were looking for and what data sets we were using, and really understanding that science was meant to be replicatable, that people can build off of what you've experimented with, and that they should be able to repeat it, get the same results. But ultimately, if they look at your discussion notes, they can see what limitations you were up against and perhaps even do the experiment better next time because they took what you learned from this, and so they can evolve it. I put in the same amount of effort. So grades, sometimes I think people perceive like, oh, if you got a low grade, you just didn't put in the effort. I put in the same amount of effort. And it went from B-, B+, B+, and finally I finished out with an A in the 4 courses that are part of the certificate. And I only saved my grade because if I had to write a paper, I was getting an A on that paper. If I had to take an exam, I just don't know how to study for science yet. I'm finally figuring it out, but it took me a while. And so I don't think sometimes bad grades are a way to say, get out of here. I had to figure it out. It just took me a little longer to get there. I want to learn SQL. I just took a SQL class. My brain needs to now go and practice like the 1NF, 2NF, 3NF, like how do you clean and how do you sort out and make it logical? I don't naturally go there, but I'll get there if I give it enough time and focused attention. And so I think that I think also people who have a natural inclination to science have to think that way about writing and presenting and communicating. It just takes them a little longer to get there. Just because they're not naturally going to get the A doesn't mean they shouldn't do it. And so I think we need to find ways to also be supportive about that it's okay to struggle with things. It's okay to take a little longer to get there.
Yeah, I think engineering in general for people is intimidating, or you often get the comment, oh, you have to be so smart to get into it. I'm like, no, it's the reason why engineering is intimidating is because for us, it's a black box. We don't know what's inside. But once you get into it, you started to dismantle this black box into understanding the system, how the system works, how every single line of code works, or even just like understanding the processes. You're just like, oh, this is so easy. Once that idea of the system clicks in your brain, it makes sense. And I'm pretty sure it will maybe be the same for me if I decide to take on like oil paint and understand color theory and understand paint strokes and how texture works on a canvas. That might click for me, but I think it's for me to see, a Monet is like, how does someone do that? it's also like something that I'm just like, there's no way I can achieve that. But if I actually put brushes on canvas with paint, I might be able to, you know, maybe not the Monet level, but like paint something that is interesting.
Well, you bring up a point that I want to sort of address, which is there was a point where we went from playing live music to recording music. And when people played live music, it didn't have to be perfect or as good. When we listen to a recording that's recorded, it's the best that it can be. It's remastered, it's mixed, it's produced. So all of us have stopped playing musical instruments because we think, well, we can't be that good as what we hear on that recording, so we don't even try. And it, for mental health, my stepmother works in mental health, and what they do is they play games, they do art, they do dancing, they do talk therapy. All of those things are so incredibly valuable for our mental health. You talked about nature, puzzles. Those are the ways that we restore ourselves. We put ourselves back together again. They're part of our healing. And when you have healing, then you have self-expression, you have courage, you have engagement. And we need mental health. So I think when people say, oh, well, we don't need the arts because they're extraneous, it's like, no, the arts are actually how we interpret the world, how we process things, how we make peace with things, how we learn to grow and evolve and grieve and celebrate. And that person picked that particular moment. I think that's one of the hardest things in art, is to commit. You've got a blank canvas. What am I going to commit on this page? And then the actual art of the brushstrokes and which colors and the technique, you do learn over time. I'm evolving the podcast with guests. It took me a while to get there. I decided to start where I started. I will learn to get better as a host. I will learn to get better as an editor. And now I'm moving into video. And I was spinning for a while thinking, where do I start? And actually my interest in video and audio and podcasts in the pandemic, I wanted to say something and I didn't know how to say it. I didn't know where I wanted to say it. I didn't know who I wanted to say it to. And I happened to meet a woman, and she runs 360 Talk Radio for Women. And she said, hey, I'm just launching this channel. I need hosts. And I raised my hand and I said, tell me more. And I'm totally interested because I knew I wanted to say something. And she said, 1 hour audio for women empowerment, go. And having, so in some ways the constraints help art, because you get clear of what am I doing? I think when you have all the possibilities, it spins out. And so when an artist finally figures out, I'm painting this model or I'm painting these flowers, it's easier. But we also have to be comfortable being not great at something, that it's okay to paint a bad picture. It's okay to make music, and same with speaking foreign languages. It's okay to fumble through it and not to expect perfection from ourselves. And I think the same thing in coding. When you begin, just being comfortable beginning, and then and being okay getting stuck.
Yeah, if like especially with language learners, I have a real close friend who is a language teacher. I have a language teacher who is a polyglot, and the first thing he always, in terms of tips, he always give out is, don't be afraid to try and talk in this new language that you're learning. You are not going to be perfect the first time, and the only way you learn and you get better is to keep going at it, like say it, like communicate, use it. And that is like same thing with everything. You can get better if you don't try or if you don't do it. That's just like anything in life, I guess.
Yeah, it's just putting the time in. I was recently just sort of spinning and wanting to kind of do more on YouTube. And then I realized that my computer had rebelled and was like, I'm not editing anymore. You've maxed me out. And I look longingly at new computers, and I'm like, no, I'm not. My editing skills aren't really as good right now to sort of justify why would I want a new computer just to run Premiere Pro. I'm moderate at it. I would need a lot more time in. But then I said, well, let's go with the constraints. Let's go with what we have. And what I have right now is the ability to go live, the ability, I use Canva. I can make a really good looking thumbnail. I have tons of ideas. And so I said, so actually yesterday, I actually decided, I was like, okay, make some thumbnails, go live and make it really short. Say what I have to say. It's not fancy and it doesn't need to be. If I find the audience, if what I have to say resonates, if I can get the momentum, get my own discipline, and then over time it makes sense to make an investment because I'm already proving progress, I'll make that investment. But sometimes it's just you start with exactly what you have in front of you and go with imperfection. Because the nice thing about virality is if it's awful, nobody will see it. And if it's good, it will find momentum. And actually, maybe some of my messaging is meant to be useful. So one of the videos I made yesterday was about a scholarship program. So I'm finding little ways to like create content.
I was drawing, and maybe this is like my how my brain works, but when you were talking about small increments and how we evolve over time through practice, it makes me think about, in the tech world, we talk about the agile methodology. It's exactly that. It's like incremental changes and improvements over time. And that's how successful company evolve. And successful products present themselves, is being able to release when the MVP is ready, release increments and feature based, because they listen to customer and they iterate themselves into improvements, into successful products. And if you see how Google works with their products, same thing. They go out strong because they have the MVP, and then they cut it like no one's business because they no longer see traction or there is no way to grow. So and you sometimes just need to find that in yourself, to make sure like you're not being bottlenecked by perfection, and you're ready to just like show the world what you've got. And I think like part of that is really aligned with one another in solution, in just systems thinking. And I appreciate the fact that we're talking about these like small things that will get us to, the end goal or the bigger picture.
Yes, and I've been playing with language learning because language learning also intersects with the intelligence community. And that's the intersection that I see myself working in, is the intelligence community and the tech community. And so we talk about machine learning is part of that. So actually that's one of my, I've been spending time thinking about these micro channels of where do I take all my interests and then put them in different buckets. Because that was another tip they said, to sort of niche out a little bit, as opposed to just taking one channel and kind of throwing everything on it. And one of the channels is actually called GeoEnt AI. So looking at, and part of it is I'm my own audience for this because there are things I want to research. There are things I want to know. So for example, within the scholarship, it's supported by 17 government agencies and they just have a logo. And I don't even know who all those agencies are. So I was like, ooh, I want to make a video about that so I can better understand who all those agencies are and who are all the players that define the intelligence community or GeoEnt. And then I think same thing, learning this just technology journey. A big part of it was just understanding the platforms that I needed to learn, understanding the path forward. Oh, there's this. Oh, this is how these things connect. So even without doing the deep dive into knowing the programming, it was understanding what are all the programming languages and what are they used for, and what are all, just how the whole ecosystem works together. And then this kind of leads me into the conversation of leadership, because you do a lot with engineering leadership. And leadership has a lot to do with seeing the big picture and how all of these things fit together, and then going in and kind of optimizing.
Yeah. Most recently, I learned this phrase, systems thinking. And I'm like, that's what I have been doing all along, just thinking about the bigger picture. if you ever looked up systems thinking, you will understand what I'm saying. Um, it, it's being able to adapt to, like, I think like my history of working with different company, different industry, different teams allows me to see that bigger picture. My professional goals right now is really to grow engineers to their full capacity to deliver a successful product. That's really what I want to do for my current role. And that allows me to seek this like human connection, one-on-one, understand each engineer's needs, and then align their their professional goals with the product goal, with the company goals, and then showcase the options on what can potentially be their path, and then get them to agree on it and keep going. Understand and being able to showcase that piece, like, do you know that, hey, this can align with our current initiative and you should work on this as part of your goal, and then this will help you grow as professionally as well. So that's something that I like really focus on when it comes to like keep the engineer motivation going, as well as like understand each other's needs, and still align with company goal. That's a huge thing that I don't see a lot of leadership do. I understand the traditional leadership where you introduce frameworks, like to get a process going for structure. But then at the same time, as managers, you often forget that it's the people that you're managing. And people requires a lot of empathy, requires a lot of human connection, trust. And that is probably the toughest part that often engineering managers cannot take on, because they have such heavy technical background that they forget that it's the people that they're managing, not the system, not the code, not anything else. And I come from a perspective because from this unique perspective, because I just want I want this kind of management for myself. So I am trying to showcase that to my team to make sure that they are also getting that support and have motivation to keep going, because there are more interesting things out there than what we currently do, and it can quickly attract them. There is no more 30-year career journeys anymore nowadays. Unfortunately, that's just the reality. And I like this like newer generation that's coming in, that has wears their feelings on their sleeve, and we're very open about like talking about, just you mentioned before, like mental health. We're very open about how we feel personally, and share with your colleague on how your environmental change can affect your work. And that's important to discuss now, especially nowadays. So as someone who's in a leadership role, that's what I try to put in for my engineers. It's like I'm not only thinking about the technical goals here, I'm also thinking about personal goals, and I care about everyone that I manage.
That's huge. I worked for a hyper growth startup for a while that had some growing pains. And I saw a lot of things that they were trying to do right. And I saw a lot of things that just went very wrong. And I think that, and they say in many, many management books about how people will stay for their manager. They will also leave because of their manager. So I think that sometimes like management's also in those details.
Yeah. Sometimes, and there can be like very unclear side when it comes, or even unfair side of like promotions and pay raises, or even just like employee benefits. And those are some companies are very transparent about that. Some companies are not. I would encourage people to really get it on paper. If you're having a conversation with either HR or either your manager, and you're talking about future plans that is going to be part of your career package, you should definitely get it on paper, because this verbal agreement never really stick. So we need to make sure that that is being written down. And you mentioned before on not prepared manager being put into managerial roles and not being able to take on that role completely because lack of training. A lot of software developers out there think that their only career path is management, like that is the ultimate goal. That is not true. There are a lot of technical roles and senior and beyond roles that allows you to be technical focused, but showcase leadership. And your leadership style is not people management. Your leadership style is based on technical influence, and that is key of your growth as well.
I just finished a leadership class where we identified 4 different types of leadership. And I feel like a lot of the Women Techmaker ambassadors I speak to all come into the program with 2 of those types of leadership pretty well defined and are using in their work, in their life. And that's strategic leadership and operational leadership. And I think where I'm seeing the growth for many of the Techmaker ambassadors is in thought leadership and in bridge building leadership.
I agree. There is definitely a different touch for women taking in leadership. I don't want to say that we're different species. I do want to emphasize the things that we care for is very different from traditional management. And that's why diversity is important. Having different kind of leadership is important, because the traditional leadership was great, but no longer work nowadays. I was talking about how my leadership style is different than traditional leadership, mainly because there is a lot of like business management coming down, because at the end of the day we are working for a company that is making money, so there's always that business management leadership coming down where it will influence the decision being made as for all of our developers, because we are the doers and we're the one who creates. So essentially that traditional or old school way of doing will eventually have to come in contact with newer trend, newer workforce, newer culture. And I think we're in that evolution for sure.
I can definitely see that evolution. And I think, just thinking back, I'm in Hurricane Alley right now in Southern California. This hurricane hasn't come to this part of the world in 84 years. So let's just think about how much the world has changed in 84 years. My mom's 85. And in her lifetime, things have changed significantly in terms of the role of women in the home, women in the workforce, and just the cost of housing. And the cost of housing plays into this, because you used to have one person could manage a family, and the other person their income could pay for the things, and then the other person managed the house, and that was the social structure. And then as women went into the workforce, it just became that now you require 2 incomes, And then you have to think about the commuting distance and the commuting time and the house you can afford relative to 2 jobs and their locations. And now we're all sort of wanting to say, well, we want to be more environmentally friendly. Well, every hour you spend in the car is not environmentally friendly. And so, how do you manage all of that? I really believe there was a trend that we saw in, I want to say that really started perhaps in the 90s. I really felt like I saw this a lot through the last 20 years, is that women, in a lot of cases, decided that being divorced and having their kids every other week was what solved the problem, because they're like, I can work and have my week where I focus on work, and then I can have my kids. And I just, and my husband just would not step up when we were married. And because of this on again, off again, now he's sort of forced to step up.
That's a very interesting perspective. As a single woman with no children, I think I definitely would take that as a different perspective. I don't know. I can't say that I know or understand. But where you mentioned like where the social structure becomes double income, have to figure out the geography of where you work, and also be mindful of the environment. It's a lot for us to take on right now. Absolutely. Like what defines as a family is very different now compared to 80 years ago. Our our demand is different, and being like having work from home as an option nowadays is, especially for the tech industry, it's a boost in how we can share our roles, and having all these gadgets to help our I'm going to say home maintenance is also a great way for us to do more things when it comes to having more income or be part of this gig economy. Same thing. I think like just the time and the environment and the technology is changing the way we live, and we need to be part of that process to grow. To reflect back to our education system, it's actually lagging. Our education system is not evolving fast enough for what we're facing right now. I was talking to someone who has, again, they're parents, they're a parent themselves, and for them to say like, oh, it's so, it was fascinating to watch their child attempt to use a flip gesture on a book is just like a very, it's sort of like weird because what their children are used to is this digital interaction, but when they face a physical book they don't know how to flip it for real, and that's just that's a challenge where our education needs to really speed up on this process of technology emergence into our daily world, and trying to make sure that we are also educating the process and uplifting everybody that is part of this process.
And when you talk about the intersection of physical books, digital books, I feel I'm Gen X, so I am totally analog and digital. So I learned cursive and I learned handwriting and I constantly hand journal, and yet I type. And my mom raised me to be a secretary. I am a fabulous administrator. Like that is just the job that I just do naturally. That was the job that I was raised to do. And when I said I was at the startup and I wore a lot of hats, I would have guys who had many more advanced degrees than I had at that time come to me and say, oh, could you type this up for me? Because they typed with 2 fingers, because nobody taught them to type. And yet I type like the wind because I was raised by a mom who's 85 who, knew that I wasn't that inclined to nursing. And so she figured, well, secretarial is your next best option. And I guess educator and teacher would be number 3. But really at the time that she grew up, that's what women did. Those were your options. You were going to be a nurse, you were going to be a secretary, or you were going to be a school teacher.
My parents' influence in me is very interesting. Now, I didn't come from a traditional background for the role that I'm in, but my parents also didn't have the traditional background of someone who has a daughter who's in engineering management. My mom is a homemaker, my dad is a mechanic, and for them, growing up is immigration dream for me to become a doctor. But then at the same time, they didn't stop me from what I was doing or exploring new things. They exposed me to various things from like piano lessons to Chinese calligraphy to even like um, math, heavy math, and to my dad at in front of his like broken engine at his with the scooter, and he's just like, come check out how I make this engine work. Like they didn't really stop me from learning or exploring, and I think that's a huge influence in how we become the person we are today. So in terms of like this gender gap that we have in the tech industry is influencing your children to be whatever they can be. I think to relate to the pop culture now with how Barbie is breaking this like gender box, and Barbie's slogan is "You can be whatever you want," is a huge deal because when we are put into a certain box or trying to be assigned to a certain role, it limits it limits your capability and you're just told to be, um, and that is a huge part why the reason why we are here, that there's a gender gap, and that we need to recover or we need to improve, is all of like this capability, or tell the future generation that they can be whatever it is that they see themselves to be.
Yes. And then also whatever we be can evolve over time, because just because I was not necessarily encouraged or educated in the maths or science when I went on to college, that was just not part of my college education. And now that I'm going for the science degree, it's still not technically part of the education, but everybody around me within the program is saying it's really helpful to know statistics and calculus and linear algebra, especially if you're going into AI and machine learning and all the things that I want to do. So there's Khan Academy. There's other places where I can lean in and learn these things that now I'm very interested in learning. And just because I didn't learn them at 20 or 30 or 40, I'm now 48. It's there, and my curiosity, and we're all living longer. I absolutely, God willing, expect to live till at least 98. So I look at it like, hey, I got another 50 years, and I want to know that I can contribute to society in that time. And then I'm sure that 20 years from now, there'll be another pivot and another way that I'll have to reskill. I saw that in 2012 when I moved to Colorado. There were a lot of middle-aged boomer women who had very stable jobs, typically in the real estate, property management industry, as an example. And they were mad about social media. They were mad about digital marketing. They felt so on the back foot. They didn't understand what it was, how it worked, yet it had come into their workplace and gave them this sense of destabilization. And over the last 20 years, we've seen that everybody has had to become digitally literate. And now where we are now, and it's coming at us very quickly, is all of us need to become data literate. Even if we're not coding and programming AI, AI is in our lives and it's coming at us. If you just even open a Google window and do a Google search, you've got AI in front of you. But AI is making decisions about your finances and what you're approved for and the legal system and countless ways that all of these things are coming into our lives.
It's really important to know that we cannot stop technology from improving. We just can't. I think there was also an era about robotics. When manufacturing becomes robotics, that robotics take over human labor. I think there's absolutely no stopping that. And same thing with the AI. There's absolutely no stopping that from getting into our workplace. And we need to understand. We need to take time to understand why it's being introduced. Um, it's always efficiency when it comes to process, right? So if you think, and developers nowadays might think that their job will be taken away by AI because they can code now. um, but that's not true. You have to re-envision yourself as a person and really understand what's the purpose of AI code generator. And then getting to know how it's learning and how it's coding, and then understand how you can be effective as a programmer, as a solution creator, as a problem solver. Then you will find yourself very useful in this case, because AI is still controlled by data and the knowledge that it knows. But you as a human, we as humans, we are more dynamic, have multi angle at looking at problems than what a computer code could do. So we need to like get to that side of the spectrum to really understand that technology is not here to take over the world. It's here to help us, and we need to have this like positive aspect to it to see how can we make ourselves useful, to make sure that we can work alongside these technology and become part of the trend, essentially.
I agree with all of that. There's a great book called Weapons of Math Destruction by Kathy O'Neill. And math being MATH destruction. She talks about how a lot of companies still kind of put AI in a proprietary black box, and that it's important for us as society to speak up and speak out where is AI creating bias or inequities, that there needs to be a reporting system, that if you're seeing a problem that it's causing in your life or your community, that there's a way to speak up about it and to say, hey, we can do better. And in all of these things, super simple things, I use an AI generator for my transcript, and it understands if you have a very clear North American accent, but if you don't, it does not understand you yet. And there's bias in that. So we need to train our models not just on North American accents, but on different accents and different languages and different things, so that we're not creating more division in the world, but we can create more opportunity. And that's where I think the whole conversations about DEI are incredibly important, and that making sure that people are aware of how AI is being deployed in our society, so they can, because a lot of times the technologists, I feel, always come at this from possibility, potential, growth, and they miss how it can be subverted and used in ways that they hadn't considered. If you go back to Facebook had English moderators. It wasn't moderating in all the different languages. And you had a coup in Myanmar that was completely orchestrated on Facebook because there were no moderators. That conversation would never have been allowed to happen if it wasn't happening in English. But they didn't think that they needed to manage it in different places in the world. And so I think that we also, again, as a society, need to be the guardrails.
Yeah, when we create a new piece of technology, we need to think about who are the people who are using it. And it's very likely that we are not the person, we're not the role model or the perfect example, because there's a slogan that I used to make my students say when I used to teach, is that we are not our users. I am not our user. I ask them to repeat, I am not my user, because there is this aspect of the piece of, doesn't matter what it is that you create, it's always going to be presented to someone else, and these people will never really use the software or technology or the solution that you created the way you intended to be used.
Right.
Because they just have this like very creative way of using it. And it's not their fault, because they use it however they see it. And everyone's perception is different. So we need to employ people with different aspect of background, or different knowledge base. There's there's a lot of benefit when it comes to having D&I on board with your solution making process.
You reminded me when you said that of Tide Pods.
Yep.
Like, nobody at Tide ever thought, okay, the kids are going to go with this trend and it's going to be dangerous. And that was not the intended use. So as society, we have to put up guardrails, because there's just unimaginable ways that people will use things that are just not as directed.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I was doing some TikTok for a while in support of Ukraine, and I kind of stopped in the fact that I kept getting in fights with TikTok, because I would see videos that are monitored and managed by the Russian TikTok team, and they have completely different standards than the North American TikTok team. And so when I was looking at it going, well, they're allowed to post things that show people in military uniform, or so many things that they just hold different standards. And I just got to the point where I decided that I wasn't going to fight with them anymore, and my energy was better somewhere else. But just even in community moderation has different standards.
Yeah, and I find that it's really interesting with community moderation too. If you're part of the open source community, you would know every GitHub repository has their own culture, has their own approval process, and yes, it is important to understand them and to abide by them. So yeah, I think like code of conduct is really important when you're building a community, and that's where you pretty much share the manual or the guardrail that you mentioned, that you want people to abide by, because there's just so many different ways that people will behave that is not okay when it comes to sharing a same space.
Yeah. And so actually that leads me to, let's bring this back to Women Techmakers Ambassador and the I Am Remarkable program, because a lot of putting up guardrails is learning how to speak up, learning how to say, hey, something's wrong. Hey, I need to advocate for myself or my community. Hey, I see something that could be improved here. And I just signed up for the I Am Remarkable programs. I haven't done it yet. And I know that you're also a facilitator on that. So tell me how that is something that kind of helps people have that voice.
Yes, so I Am Remarkable is intended to challenge the perspective of self-promotion, as well as teaching and coaching people who are having difficulty with self-promotion to understand how to be good at it and practice. So I'm Remarkable is a workshop that gives you that first step. First of all, to understand why we're here, and then understand how to make change, and then teach you how to self-promote, and then exercise self-promotion, and then ask you to challenge the perception of self-promotion. And that is, for me, is a great program, because I encompass all the underrepresented traits in my industry, and I want to. There were definitely times that I wish that I had this program, that I could just feel comfortable to speak for myself, to highlight my accomplishment with the people around me. But it took me through my own learning to get to here where I am. So I was really happy to see such a program being promoted by Google where I could use it and train other people and empower other people like me to be able to get to self promote better for themselves. Whether it is personal use or professional use, I think it's important for everybody to be able to speak on behalf of their accomplishment and feel comfortable with it. We are definitely in a digital world where we see perfections than we normally can, and with the AI manipulation as well, people look perfect, and that's why there is definitely a social shock where we want to present our own self, but no one is going to talk about your accomplishment than yourself, because your accomplishment is done by you. And we wish that we can take our mother to work because they could be your best cheerleader, but that's not the case, right? So we have to be the voice of our accomplishment and then be our own cheerleaders to get better at what we want in our career. And this is what I Am Remarkable opens the door for. For all the information you will be able to find on iamremarkable.com or I Am Remarkable with Google. And like you mentioned, the workshop is 90 minutes. It will walk you through exactly what I just described, and you will have sort of like a trick in your back pocket. And again, self-promotion takes time. This is the skill that you have to learn for yourself, and it will take time to practice. So what I Am Remarkable offer is that first step. And once you get there, you will have the momentum of building on top of that.
And sometimes you have to advocate for yourself in front of your mom, because as I embark on my YouTube journey, my mom's like, well, how much did you make? I'm like, it doesn't work that way, Mom. I love you, but it doesn't work that way. You have to begin. So I kind of equated it to Uber driving or Airbnb. You have to get your vehicle, you have to sign up, and you have to open your app, and you have to show up, and you have to run the rides. And for me, it's posting videos, and then they deliver the audience.
Yes. Self-promotion is like, if you don't share that with anybody, you will not get the credibility that you wanted, because the rest of the world don't know you. and if you want people to notice, then that's the only way to be comfortable self-promoting.
And
my advice for people who are getting started with the tech industry is to utilize your resources. Just as you mentioned, that you posted a video in a general hallway, engage with the opportunity that is, showing up in front of you. Engage with the resources that is being presented to you, and utilize them. Get them into your tool bills, and understand why these resources are available to you. If you're someone who is trying to learn Java, the internet is your oyster. The library is there for you. There's so many resources out there for learning that you don't even know. Activate the community who are focusing in a specific technology that you're into. Get involved with them, and work on your project that has some influencing opportunity with your local community or city. Be part of the change, because that is going to impact how you decide what your career is going to look like, and how you decide what is the next best thing you want to create. And for us all in the tech world, we are all problem solvers, and we are here to to challenge our brain to solve one problem at a time. And it is up to you to find your niche and your interest.